Mom and Dad said I could move in. Rebecca smirked at me with that infuriating confidence of hers. If you've got a problem with it, go ahead and call the cops. My older sister stood there in my trashed living room, arms crossed like she owned the place. The space that used to be my pristine sanctuary now looked like a tornado had blown through it, leaving destruction in its wake. I'm Morgan Bennett, 31 years old, and I've built my reputation as an interior designer in Miami from absolutely nothing. Back in my teens, I dove headfirst into the creative world I'd always fantasized about, burning the midnight oil for years and years until I finally launched my own design firm. These days, I'm designing homes for South Florida's wealthiest clients, and my business keeps growing steadily. My success story is written all over my second home that overlooks South Beach, a minimalist white canvas decorated with art and furniture I've collected from every corner of the globe. That place fills me with inspiration every single time I walk through the door. But I wasn't about to stop there and rest on my accomplishments. My next big move was expanding to the West Coast, specifically Beverly Hills. Opening a design studio and gallery out there would require massive capital, the kind of investment that makes you think twice and plan carefully. So I came up with a practical solution that made good business sense. I'd rent out my Miami penthouse and funnel that rental income straight into funding the expansion. Once I'd made up my mind, I moved fast and decisively. First thing I did was reach out to Jason Martinez, the property manager I'd worked with before and trusted completely, asking him to find me the perfect tenant who would respect the space. Then I had my attorney draft an ironclad lease agreement that would cover every possible scenario and protect my interests as the property owner. My philosophy has always been simple and straightforward. In business, everything hinges on documentation and contracts. You can't ever be too careful when protecting your assets and investments. To make sure the property was in pristine condition, I renovated the entire interior and had a top-of-the-line security system installed. A few weeks later, the penthouse was gleaming like a five-star hotel suite. I felt confident everything was ready. All I needed now was to find the right renter. At that moment, I didn't have a single worry in the world. I had no clue that the person who would completely destroy my sanctuary was actually a lot closer than I ever imagined. My parents lived quietly in the Florida suburbs, a typical middle-class couple who never really understood the scope of what I'd built. One weekend, I drove out to see them and mentioned my plan to rent out the Miami penthouse to finance my West Coast expansion. "Mom and Dad, I'm opening a new studio on the West Coast," I explained. "So I'm going to rent out my Miami place for a while." My father, Robert, squinted at me with that proud look he gets. "That's incredible, Morgan. I'm really proud of you, sweetheart." But my mother, Linda, frowned immediately. "Rent it to strangers? That gorgeous home? Isn't that risky?" "Don't worry, Mom. I've got a management company handling it, plus my lawyers overseeing everything. It'll all be done properly." That's when it happened. Like she'd been waiting just outside for her cue, my sister Rebecca walked in with her 3 kids, Emma, Tyler, and Sophie. She must have been eavesdropping. "Morgan's renting out her place," she said with fake surprise in her voice. The kids instantly turned the living room into a disaster zone, bouncing on the couch and demanding snacks. "Yeah, it's for business," I said curtly. Rebecca's face lit up like someone had just handed her a winning lottery ticket. "Oh, perfect. Then you can rent it to us." Her words were so casual, so presumptuous, that for a second I couldn't even process what she'd just said. "To you?" "That's right. Our apartment's way too cramped now that the kids are getting bigger. And your penthouse is in an amazing school district, isn't it? It'd be perfect for the kids' education." Her eyes were practically sparkling with excitement. In her mind, the whole thing was already decided. She and her family would live rent-free in her little sister's luxury penthouse while her kids attended top-tier schools. I calmly but firmly brought her back down to earth. "Rebecca, this is business. The rental income is part of my investment strategy." Rebecca's eyes went wide. "Rent? You're seriously going to charge us rent?" Her voice echoed through the room. My mother jumped to Rebecca's defense. "Morgan, how can you say that? Rebecca's your only sister raising 3 children. You could help her out." "Help her out? This is my property, my business. It's not charity. My voice came out cold. My father tried to mediate. Let's all calm down. But Rebecca exploded. She glared at me like a crusader for justice. Morgan, you don't get it. You have no idea how hard it is for a normal family to raise 3 kids. All you care about is making money. You've never stressed about grocery bills or tuition like we do. Her words were unfair. She had no clue how hard I'd worked, how many risks I'd taken. In her eyes, I was just the lucky little sister who made easy money. You wouldn't understand. Rebecca's voice turned shrill and hysterical. You live alone in your fancy apartment doing what you love, making tons of money. What's wrong with helping family? Now you want to charge your own sister rent? You're greedy, Morgan. Heartless. Greedy? I repeated slowly. I could feel blood rushing to my head. I wasn't angry anymore, just stunned by the absurdity. My mother twisted the knife deeper. She's right. You can help your family. That's what family means. God wants those who have to share. God? I almost laughed. What they were doing wasn't generosity. It was entitled dependency dressed as virtue. I stood quietly. That's enough! This conversation is over. My decision stands. I turned to leave, but Rebecca screamed at my back. Don't you dare walk away, you ungrateful brat! That family meeting wasn't a discussion. It was just an exhausting, pointless assault on my patience. A few days later, Jason from the property management company called me. Morgan, great news. We've had several inquiries, but there's one couple in particular I think would be absolutely perfect. Both doctors, solid backgrounds, excellent references, and they absolutely love your design aesthetic. Would you be willing to meet them and show the place personally? It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. A pair of doctors would make ideal tenants, responsible, respectful, and financially secure. Absolutely, Jason. Set up the appointment, I said without hesitating. The showing was scheduled for Friday afternoon. At 2 that Friday, I met Jason and the Mitchells in the lobby of my penthouse building. Dr. Ryan Mitchell was this calm, refined gentleman, and his wife, Sarah, radiated intelligence and grace. The moment we shook hands, I knew they were the perfect fit. This way, please, I said confidently, pressing the button for the private elevator. As we rode up, Jason explained the building's advanced security features, filling the space with polite small talk. This second home means everything to me. I designed it right after launching my firm. It represents where everything began. Standing in front of the living room door, I placed my finger on the smart lock scanner. I'm sure you'll absolutely love it. A soft click sounded as the lock disengaged. With practiced grace, I pushed the door open. Please come in. But my words died in my throat. What stretched out before me wasn't the serene, immaculate space I'd so carefully created. The Italian glass coffee table that should have been centered in the room had been shoved to the side, buried under a half-empty cereal box and a milk carton. The pure, white leather sofa was covered with some garish cartoon blanket, and the floor was littered with colorful plastic toys like landmines scattered everywhere. And right in the middle of it all sat Rebecca, wearing sweatpants and clutching a bag of potato chips, watching some loud television show. For a moment, time seemed to stop. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Jason's face went completely pale. The Mitchells stood frozen behind me, their expressions shifting from confusion to discomfort. Rebecca glanced up from her chips, looking utterly unbothered. Oh, hey, Morgan. Didn't expect you today. Her casual tone, like she was greeting me in a coffee shop, made my blood run cold. What are you doing here? My voice came out strangely calm, almost detached. I told you, Mom and Dad gave me permission. If you don't like it, call the police. She said it with this smug grin, like she'd just played the winning card in a game. Behind me, I heard Dr. Mitchell clear his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should reschedule, he said quietly to Jason. I'm terribly sorry, I managed to say, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. This is completely unauthorized. Please, give me a moment. The Mitchells nodded politely and retreated toward the elevator with Jason, who looked absolutely mortified. The moment they were out of earshot, I turned back to Rebecca. Get out, now. Or what? She laughed, popping another chip into her mouth. You're going to throw your own sister out on the street? With 3 kids? Mom and Dad would never forgive you. That's when something inside me snapped, not into rage, but into perfect, crystalline clarity. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's an unauthorized person in my property. I need police assistance for a trespassing situation. Rebecca's face finally changed, the confidence draining away. You're not serious. I gave the dispatcher my address, name, and a calm description. When I hung up, Rebecca stood, face flushed. You called the cops? On your sister? You're insane. I'm protecting my property. The police will be here shortly. Panic flickered across her face. Mom and Dad gave me permission. They don't own this property. I do. Within 15 minutes, 2 officers arrived. I showed them my documents and explained Rebecca had no lease, no permission, and entered illegally. Officer David Torres listened, then turned to Rebecca. Ma'am, do you have documentation showing legal right to be here? Rebecca stammered about family, about our parents' permission, but the officer cut her off. Without owner consent, this is trespassing. Gather your belongings and leave immediately or we'll arrest you. Where are the kids? I asked. They're in the bedroom, Rebecca said, her face crumpled. I found Emma, Tyler, and Sophie huddled on the bed, scared and confused. My heart ached, but this wasn't their fault. I called my parents. Mom answered immediately. Morgan, what's happening? Rebecca texted you called police. That's correct. She broke into my property. Officers are here. Come get the kids now. How could you do this to your sister? Mom's voice was shrill. I did what Rebecca told me to. She said call the police if I didn't like it. So I did. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't given her my key without permission. Are you blaming me? You're abandoning your sister. She's 38, Mom. A grown woman and mother. She's responsible for her actions. You meant well, but your kindness turned your daughter into a criminal. I heard Mom gasp. Rebecca stared at me, her face drained of all color, eyes wide with despair as the officers stood beside her. You will never again step into my life or touch my property without my explicit permission. From now on, you and Dad will take full responsibility for Rebecca and her children. Our little family game is finished. I ended the call. Turning to Officer Torres, I said calmly, My parents will be here shortly to pick up the children. Here's their contact information. I handed him the details. The officers nodded and informed Rebecca she was being taken into custody for trespassing. When they escorted her out, only the children's confused, frightened cries echoed through the room. I knelt down and spoke to them as gently as I could. It's going to be okay now. You don't need to be scared. Grandma's coming to get you very soon. Emma was still sobbing, and all I could do was gently stroke her trembling back in silence. They weren't to blame. Their only mistake was being born to a foolish mother. About 30 minutes later, my parents arrived, pale and breathless. My mother rushed to the children, gathering them in her arms as they cried. My father stood frozen, his gaze moving between the destroyed living room and my face. Anger, disappointment, and maybe a flicker of fear clouded his expression. Morgan, what have you done? His voice was thin, forced out through clenched teeth. What have I done? I protected what belongs to me according to the law, I replied evenly. What's wrong with calling the police on trespassers? They're your family. I've heard that word enough for one lifetime. I cut him off. Have you ever once stopped to think about how much I've had to sacrifice for your so-called family? Rebecca became who she is because you both enabled her, spoiled her, shielded her from consequences, and taught her that everyone else would clean up her messes. This ends right now. You'll take the children. You can also pay for her lawyer. My mother glared at me over the children's heads, her eyes burning with hatred. You're no daughter of ours. Those words should have pierced my heart like a blade. But strangely, there was no pain. Instead, I felt something close to relief, like a heavy chain I'd been dragging for years had finally broken. You're probably right, I said quietly. Then I turned my back on them. My parents hurried out, shepherding the children toward the door. It closed behind them with a final click. Silence settled over the room, real and absolute. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the chaos they'd left behind. Toys scattered everywhere, chocolate stains on the sofa, crinkled candy wrappers tossed around carelessly. It looked like the remains of a sickness finally purged, the rot that had been festering inside something called family. That very day, I called a locksmith and had every single lock in the house changed. I would make absolutely certain they could never set foot in this sanctuary again. Then I grabbed a stack of garbage bags and started throwing everything away. Every toy, every piece of clothing, every trace of them. The next morning, I called Jason, the property manager. He sounded absolutely mortified over the phone. "Morgan, I cannot apologize enough for what happened yesterday. I already reached out to the Mitchells personally to try and smooth things over, but I'm afraid." "I know, Jason. Regaining their trust will be difficult," I cut him off, mid-sentence. "But my decision stands." "You've done your best. If you think it's better for me to find a new management company, I'll understand." "Absolutely not," he said, his tone firm. "Morgan, your composure yesterday was remarkable. I'm not losing a client like you over something like this. Please let me handle it. I'll find you the perfect tenants this time, and I'll take complete responsibility." His professional, steady words brought me a small sense of relief. There were still people in this world who valued reason, who respected contracts and boundaries, and that small fact soothed the raw edges of a heart scraped open by family. Within a week, I flew to Beverly Hills and finalized the lease on my new studio location. I had enough capital to move forward without Miami's rental income. It proved I could stand alone. A few weeks later, Jason called with excitement. "Morgan, I found the perfect tenants. The new renters were French tech executives who'd just relocated. They loved the house immediately and offered 1.2 times market rate, 2 years in advance. Everything I'd fought for was finally mine." 6 months into my Beverly Hills life, Aunt Patricia called from Italy. She was the only family member I truly respected, having built her own independent life in Europe decades ago. "Morgan, darling, I saw your new studio in a magazine. It looks stunning." After some small talk, her tone softened. "I heard about Miami. You must have been through a lot." "It's over now, Aunt Trish," I said steadily. "I know, but listen for a moment. It's about Rebecca." Rebecca had avoided formal charges since it was her first offense and she had young children. Still, her life never recovered. The story spread through the family. Relatives who'd always helped her quietly pulled away once they learned the police were involved, and it was her selfishness that caused it. "No one's willing to help them anymore," Aunt Patricia said gently. Her landlord heard about the incident. After neighbor complaints, her lease renewal was refused. Even your parents, worried about appearances, no longer coddle Rebecca. They all ended up in a small apartment on Miami's outskirts. I listened silently, feeling only calm. "Morgan, you did the right thing. You're not obligated to sacrifice your life for something called family. You have every right to protect your happiness and build a life that's truly yours. Don't forget that." Those were the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. I no longer see the Miami house as a sanctuary. It's just property now, part of my portfolio. My real sanctuary lives within me, where no one can invade. Blood doesn't make family. True family respects your life and stands beside you, not on top of you.